The evening was warm and lively, the kind of night that seemed to sparkle with hidden stories waiting to unfold. The hotel's restaurant was filled with soft golden light reflecting off polished wooden floors and gleaming chandeliers. Guests moved gracefully, dressed in elegant evening wear, their laughter mingling with the gentle hum of conversation. In the corner, a grand piano sat silently, a promise of music that few had yet discovered. Among the waitstaff, one young woman moved quietly, carrying plates with a calm precision. She wore a simple black uniform, her hair tied neatly back, her eyes alert and thoughtful. Despite the opulence around her, she seemed almost invisible, like a shadow passing through a world of light. At the same time, at one of the long tables near the center, the millionaire leaned back in his chair with an air of confidence that demanded attention. His tailored suit shimmered under the warm light, a sign of wealth that drew both admiration and envy. He was used to being the center of every room he entered, and tonight was no different. He spoke with a smooth, commanding voice that carried over the soft murmur of the other guests. He was entertaining a few of his associates, telling stories and jokes that made them laugh, but his eyes wandered around the room, searching for something or someone to amuse him further. That's when he noticed her. The young waitress moved with quiet grace, balancing a tray of delicate hors d'oeuvres, her steps careful yet fluid. Something about her caught his attention, though he didn't know why. Perhaps it was the way she didn't try to impress anyone, the way she carried herself with confidence without needing recognition. For a man used to being in control and to people reacting to his every word, this calm indifference intrigued him. He smirked, the idea forming in his mind that he might stir the quiet woman, that he could provoke a reaction for his own entertainment. He called her over with a dismissive wave of his hand, speaking louder than necessary. "Come here, girl," he said, a note of mockery in his voice. Guests glanced over, some out of curiosity, some out of polite concern. She approached with a polite smile, her movements steady and unhurried, as if nothing could shake her calm. The millionaire leaned forward, resting his elbow on the table, and made a jest at her expense, pretending to question her abilities, poking fun at the simplicity of her uniform and the ordinary appearance she carried. The room fell silent for a moment, unsure how to react. Some guests chuckled nervously, unsure if laughter was expected. Others looked at her, waiting to see if she would stumble, embarrassed or angry, like they assumed someone in her position might. But she didn't flinch. She tilted her head slightly, meeting his gaze with a quiet, composed expression. There was no fear, no rush to defend herself. Only calm, observant eyes that seemed to measure the situation and wait. The millionaire laughed loudly, satisfied at first, thinking he had already won. He made another sarcastic remark, this time with more flair, drawing the attention of a few more guests who turned to watch the unfolding scene. Yet each word he spoke seemed to have little effect on her. She stayed grounded, her hands clasped gently in front of her, her demeanor polite but distant. The more he tried to mock her, the more her calmness seemed to draw a subtle kind of power. It was a quiet force, one that made him pause just slightly, though he wouldn't admit it. Other waitstaff watched nervously, unsure if they should intervene. Some guests whispered to each other, curious why she didn't react. A few began to notice the tension in the air, the unspoken challenge forming between the millionaire and the young waitress. It was no longer just a joke. It had become something else entirely, a test of patience, confidence, and perhaps talent. The young woman took a small, measured step back, giving herself space but not retreating. Her eyes drifted toward the piano, sitting quietly in its corner like a sleeping giant, waiting for someone to awaken it. There was a hint of thoughtfulness in her gaze, a memory of long hours spent practicing in solitude, of melodies that only she had ever known. The millionaire, feeling the need to entertain himself further, decided to push harder. He suggested she might be able to prove herself, speaking in a tone that was meant to belittle rather than encourage. He chuckled, expecting a nervous laugh, an apology, or some form of embarrassment. But the young waitress only nodded slightly, her lips curved in the faintest trace of a smile, as if acknowledging a secret that no one else could see. She moved deliberately toward the piano, each step measured and calm, drawing the gaze of the entire room. Guests turned their attention fully to her now. Murmurs filled the air, curiosity mixing with doubt. Could she really do something remarkable? The millionaire leaned back, confident in his assumption that she would falter, that this little display of her presence would end in awkwardness and amusement for him. But he didn't notice the shift in energy around her. There was a quiet focus, a tension that wasn't about fear but about readiness. She paused briefly before the piano, her fingers hovering above the keys, a moment of silent anticipation that seemed to stretch the seconds. The waiter beside her gave a small, supportive nod, though no one else could see it. She inhaled softly, steadying herself, and then placed her fingers lightly on the keys. The first note sounded soft and deliberate, barely audible at first. It was gentle, almost hesitant, but it held a promise that made the room lean in, listening. The millionaire raised an eyebrow, slightly annoyed, expecting something ordinary, something weak. Instead, the note lingered, filled with a subtle richness that hinted at depth and skill. He frowned, curiosity creeping in for the first time, uninvited and unwelcome. The music seemed to capture the attention of the guests without effort, drawing them away from the millionaire's arrogance. The young waitress closed her eyes briefly, letting the music flow from her memory, from her heart, rather than forcing it. Each note she played seemed to tell a story, though no words were spoken. The sounds wove through the air, soft at first, then gradually stronger, filling the space with emotion. It was a story of quiet strength, of dedication, of hidden talent waiting for the right moment to shine. Guests began to sit straighter in their chairs, captivated. Even the millionaire shifted slightly, leaning forward, unable to ignore the unexpected beauty. There was a moment when the room felt suspended in time. Conversations had stopped. Forks and glasses were forgotten. All attention was on the young woman at the piano, whose simple, unassuming presence had transformed into a force commanding admiration. The millionaire's smirk had vanished, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. The laughter he had expected never came. Instead, an undeniable respect began to form in the silence around him. The young waitress continued to play, not looking at him, not needing to, for her music spoke louder than words ever could. This first encounter between arrogance and humility, between mockery and quiet confidence, set the tone for the evening. It was a subtle, unfolding drama, a human story of talent and patience clashing with pride and expectation. The stage was set for what would come next, and although no one in the room could yet predict the full extent of the young waitress's gift, one thing was clear. She had already captured the attention of everyone, and her story was just beginning. The young waitress continued to play, her fingers moving with confidence and precision, each note carrying a warmth that seemed to wrap around the room. Guests watched in silence, their eyes wide with surprise, their expressions shifting from curiosity to amazement. Some had expected a simple tune, perhaps an amateur attempt to satisfy the millionaire's teasing, but this was something else entirely. It was clear that this was not the first time her fingers had danced across the keys. Each movement was deliberate, every note perfectly timed, and yet it flowed with the ease of someone who played not for recognition but for the sheer love of music. The millionaire, who had been so certain of her failure, now found himself leaning forward in his chair. He furrowed his brow, a mixture of surprise and disbelief crossing his face. He had mocked her, thinking she would falter, expecting the room to laugh with him, but instead, the attention had shifted entirely. The gentle rise and fall of the melody filled the space, and for the first time that evening, he felt a twinge of doubt. Could this young woman, a simple waitress, really possess a skill so extraordinary? His arrogance, which had been so natural, now seemed misplaced. Other guests whispered among themselves, careful not to disturb the performance. They had come to the restaurant to enjoy a fine dinner, perhaps a bit of conversation and light entertainment, but what they were witnessing was far beyond ordinary. The music spoke to them in a way words never could. Some guests found themselves holding their breath, captivated by the emotion pouring from the piano. It was as if the room itself had become a vessel for the story she was telling through her music. The waitress's eyes closed briefly, her face serene. She was aware of the millionaire's gaze, of the attention of every guest in the room, but she did not let it distract her. She played for herself first, letting the melody guide her, and the rest followed naturally. Each note she struck seemed to float effortlessly, building a narrative that everyone could feel. The music grew more complex, layers intertwining seamlessly, yet she handled it with such grace that it seemed effortless. The millionaire shifted in his seat, feeling a mix of admiration and irritation. He had wanted to assert his superiority, to create a moment of embarrassment for her, but she had turned the situation completely around. His laughter had died on his lips, replaced by a quiet awareness of her talent. He realized that his wealth, his status, and his influence meant nothing in the face of genuine skill and dedication. The irony of the situation was not lost on him. He had intended to dominate, to belittle, but here he was, watching someone humble and unassuming command the room with nothing more than her ability and passion. The young woman's hands moved faster now, yet there was a delicacy to every keystroke. She played with a confidence born from countless hours of practice, each note infused with feeling. Guests were no longer passive observers. They were participants in the story she was telling. Some felt the joy in the music, others sensed the struggle, the resilience, the quiet strength behind each chord. The room was alive with emotion, and even the millionaire could not escape its pull. At one point, the melody softened, almost as if the music itself was holding its breath. The waitress allowed a gentle pause, creating a space where the silence became part of the performance. The guests leaned in, captivated by the delicate balance between sound and stillness. It was a subtle reminder that true talent was not about volume or showmanship, but about the ability to touch hearts and minds without demanding attention. As she continued, the atmosphere shifted further. The guests' previous skepticism faded, replaced by admiration and awe. They began to whisper quietly, expressing their amazement at the skill before them. Even those who had initially doubted her now found themselves drawn in, unable to resist the magnetic pull of her performance. The millionaire, once the center of attention, now felt the sting of humility. He had underestimated her, and the realization was both humbling and enlightening. The young waitress's eyes opened briefly as she played, scanning the room just enough to acknowledge the silent respect she was receiving. She did not gloat or seek approval. She merely continued, her focus unwavering. There was a lesson in her composure, a demonstration that confidence and grace could speak louder than words. The music seemed to rise and fall like waves, carrying with it the emotion of someone who had faced challenges and persevered. It was not just a performance. It was a testament to resilience and self-belief. The millionaire could no longer look away. He felt a mix of admiration and discomfort, realizing that he had been wrong to mock her. His previous laughter felt shallow in comparison to the depth of talent he was witnessing. He had assumed that wealth and power gave him the right to belittle others, but here was a young woman, using nothing but her skill and dedication to command the attention and respect of everyone in the room. It was a lesson in humility that he would not forget. Guests began to clap softly as the performance reached its crescendo, their applause growing louder as the music built to its peak. The waitress played on, her fingers moving with effortless precision, creating a sound that was both powerful and delicate. The music told a story of quiet strength, of overcoming doubt, and of the unexpected beauty that can emerge when one stays true to oneself. The room was filled with an energy that was impossible to ignore, and even the millionaire felt it seep into him, challenging his assumptions and shifting his perspective. As the final notes lingered in the air, the room fell into a hushed silence. Guests were left breathless, their eyes wide, their expressions a mix of admiration and wonder. The young waitress sat back, her hands resting gently on her lap, a serene smile on her face. She had done more than play a piece of music. She had transformed the mood, captured the hearts of everyone present, and turned a moment of potential humiliation into one of triumph. The millionaire leaned back in his chair, his face thoughtful. He had come into the evening expecting amusement at someone else's expense, but instead, he had been forced to confront the power of talent, humility, and dedication. He realized that true respect could not be bought, and that sometimes the most extraordinary moments come from the most unexpected people. The young waitress, quiet and unassuming, had achieved something far greater than anyone could have imagined. Guests began to speak in hushed tones, praising the performance, sharing their amazement with those around them. The young waitress accepted their compliments with grace, never losing her calm composure. She had proven something far beyond what anyone could see at first glance. It was not just her skill at the piano, but her courage, her patience, and her unwavering belief in herself that had left such a profound impression. The millionaire could only watch, a mixture of respect and disbelief in his eyes, knowing that he had witnessed something truly remarkable, something that would be remembered long after the evening had ended. As the applause began to fade, the young waitress remained seated at the piano, her fingers resting lightly on the keys, feeling the vibrations from the music she had just played. The guests' admiration still hung in the air, their whispers of praise creating a gentle hum around her. For a moment, it seemed as if the entire room existed solely in the echo of her music. She allowed herself a brief smile, not for vanity, but because she felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. She had faced an intimidating situation and had stayed true to herself. Her music had spoken for her, and in doing so it had transformed the energy of the room. The millionaire, still seated at his table, could not stop himself from studying her. He had expected an ordinary performance, something small and forgettable, yet what he had witnessed was extraordinary. His arrogance had been challenged in the most humbling way. He had underestimated her entirely. He leaned back, his mind racing with thoughts he rarely allowed himself to have. Respect, admiration, and a hint of shame mingled within him. For the first time that evening, he experienced humility in its purest form. He realized that his wealth and influence could not command respect in the way true talent could. The guests, meanwhile, began to relax into conversation again, but their words were infused with excitement. They shared their impressions of the performance, describing the emotions they had felt, the beauty of the melody, and the skill that had gone into each note. Some of them remarked on how effortlessly she had handled the piano, how her calm demeanor made the performance even more captivating. Others, who had initially doubted her abilities, admitted openly that they had been completely wrong. The young waitress had become the center of attention not through flashy gestures or self-promotion, but through authenticity and talent. The young woman slowly rose from the piano, brushing her fingers lightly across the keys, as if to leave a silent signature of her presence. Her eyes scanned the room, meeting the gaze of the millionaire briefly. He gave a small nod, almost imperceptible, but it carried more weight than words could convey. It was an acknowledgement of skill and grace, a quiet recognition that he had misjudged her. For a man accustomed to commanding attention, it was a humbling moment, one that left him thoughtful and introspective. She returned to her role as a waitress, carrying plates and serving drinks with the same calm efficiency as before, but now the room viewed her differently. There was a new energy surrounding her, a subtle respect that had not existed earlier. Guests who had barely noticed her presence now watched with admiration, their conversations filled with whispers about her talent and composure. She moved among them effortlessly, a gentle smile on her face, her confidence quietly radiating from within. The millionaire found himself observing her more closely than he cared to admit. He had always enjoyed being the center of attention, and yet here was someone who commanded admiration without seeking it. The realization was unsettling, but it also sparked curiosity. He wanted to understand her, to see what drove this quiet strength, and perhaps to learn something he had never truly experienced himself. There was an authenticity about her that he could not replicate, and that thought lingered uncomfortably in his mind. As the evening continued, the waitress maintained her composure, seamlessly transitioning between her duties and the occasional glance at the piano, as if silently preparing for another moment. She knew that her performance had shifted the perception of those around her, but she remained grounded, not allowing the attention to change who she was. Her confidence was rooted in skill and passion, not in seeking approval or validation from others. This authenticity made her presence even more compelling. The millionaire, seated among his guests, could not ignore the ripple effect of her performance. Conversations shifted, laughter softened, and even the staff seemed more attentive, inspired by the way she had handled herself. The atmosphere of the room had changed subtly but unmistakably. The young waitress had demonstrated that true power was not in wealth or status, but in the ability to impact others through talent, humility, and courage. As the night wore on, the piano remained in the corner, a silent reminder of the evening's unexpected turn. Guests occasionally glanced at it, some imagining what it would be like if the young waitress played again. Her earlier performance had created a sense of wonder, a lingering question about what more she might reveal if given the opportunity. It was a quiet anticipation, a respect for someone who had proven that even the most unassuming person could create moments of extraordinary beauty. The millionaire's mind continued to replay the performance, the notes and the emotion lingering long after the music had ended. He realized that he had been challenged not just by her skill but by her character. The young waitress had shown patience, confidence, and grace under pressure, qualities that could not be bought or imitated. He felt a shift within himself, a subtle but undeniable change in perspective. Perhaps there was more to learn from humility than he had ever considered. Meanwhile, the waitress carried on with her evening, serving tables and interacting with guests as she always had. She remained focused on her work, her movements precise and deliberate, yet there was a quiet joy in her demeanor. She had shared a part of herself through her music, and the response had been overwhelmingly positive. The respect she had earned was not something she had sought, but it was a natural result of her talent and integrity. Guests began to comment on the story behind the music, asking if she had studied for years, if she had performed publicly before, and if she had been inspired by a particular teacher or experience. She answered modestly, giving credit to her love for music and the hours she had dedicated to practicing in private. She spoke with humility, never boasting, and her words reinforced the impression that she was someone who let her actions speak louder than her words. The millionaire watched this interaction quietly. He realized that his initial attempts to mock her had failed, not because he had underestimated her skill alone, but because he had underestimated her character. There was a strength in humility, a quiet power that drew attention and respect without demanding it. He found himself reflecting on his own behavior, considering how often he had relied on wealth and status to assert dominance rather than relying on skill, effort, or integrity. As the night progressed, the young waitress moved through the room with a sense of ease, her interactions leaving a positive impression on everyone she encountered. Her earlier performance had opened a door, not just to admiration for her talent, but to a deeper appreciation for the kind of person she was. Guests felt inspired, reminded that greatness could come from unexpected places, and that true skill was often accompanied by humility. The millionaire, for his part, remained thoughtful. He had entered the evening confident in his ability to entertain and dominate, but he was leaving with a new understanding. Respect and influence could not be demanded. They had to be earned, often in ways that were subtle and unexpected. He had witnessed someone command a room not through wealth or arrogance, but through talent, composure, and quiet confidence. It was a lesson that would stay with him, a reminder that appearances could be deceiving, and that sometimes the most remarkable people were the ones who went unnoticed at first glance. By the end of the night, the young waitress had returned the piano to silence, but the impact of her performance lingered. Guests continued to speak of her skill and grace, sharing their admiration with one another. The millionaire, once eager to mock and belittle, now viewed her with a newfound respect, quietly acknowledging the lesson she had taught him. The evening had begun as an ordinary night in a luxurious hotel, but it had transformed into a story of talent, humility, and the unexpected power of quiet strength. The room had settled into a calm rhythm after the performance, but a quiet anticipation lingered. Guests, still buzzing from the unexpected display of talent, turned their attention back to the atmosphere around them. The young waitress moved carefully through the tables, her steps measured and her movements graceful. She carried plates and drinks with precision, her hands steady, but her mind was already replaying the experience she had just shared at the piano. Each note she had played had been carefully chosen, and now, even in the quieter moments, she reflected on the emotions she had conveyed and the reaction she had evoked. The millionaire remained seated, observing her from across the room. His usual smug confidence had softened into a contemplative expression. He could not ignore the way the guests looked at her, their admiration and respect clear in every glance. He realized that he had underestimated not only her talent but also the way her character shone through in every action. It was a rare thing to see someone so modest yet so powerful in their presence. He had entered the evening expecting amusement and control, but what he had found was inspiration and humility. The young waitress approached the piano once again, this time without any intention to perform immediately. Her fingers brushed the keys lightly, as if greeting an old friend, and the room seemed to notice. Some guests turned their heads instinctively, curious whether she would play again. The air held a subtle tension, a mixture of expectation and excitement, as everyone sensed that the piano might soon come alive once more. The millionaire's gaze followed her, a mixture of curiosity and caution in his expression. He had been caught off guard once, and he was unsure whether to expect the same brilliance or something more extraordinary. She settled into the piano bench, adjusting herself with quiet confidence. Her eyes scanned the keys, her mind organizing the melody she would soon share. The room fell into silence, a collective anticipation that seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment. It was not just a musical performance about to unfold. It was a story, a communication that transcended words. The guests felt it intuitively, and even the millionaire could not deny the magnetism of the scene. As her fingers touched the keys, the first notes were soft and deliberate. They were not loud or showy, but they carried an emotional weight that immediately captured attention. The melody began to unfold slowly, each note carefully placed, creating a sense of anticipation and curiosity. Guests leaned in, some unconsciously holding their breath as they absorbed the sound. It was as if the piano was speaking directly to them, sharing a story that was both personal and universal. The young waitress allowed herself to get lost in the music, her body swaying slightly with the rhythm, her emotions flowing freely into each chord. She played with precision but also with feeling, allowing the melody to tell the story without forcing it. The room responded instinctively, every listener drawn into the narrative she created. There was a raw honesty in her performance, a vulnerability that made the music even more compelling. Guests felt connected to her in a way that was rare and profound, and the millionaire, despite himself, could not look away. As the melody developed, it gained complexity. Her fingers moved faster, more confidently, yet never clumsily. She blended technical skill with emotional expression, creating a performance that was both intricate and heartfelt. Guests were mesmerized, unable to do anything but listen and feel. The millionaire's initial disbelief had transformed into awe. He had expected to mock her, to find humor in her failure, but now he found himself captivated by the skill, dedication, and emotional depth she displayed. It was a humbling realization, one that forced him to reconsider his assumptions about talent, humility, and respect. The music took on a dynamic quality, rising and falling like waves, carrying with it the sense of a story unfolding. Guests could sense the emotions behind each chord: joy, struggle, hope, and resilience, all intertwined seamlessly. The young waitress played not for recognition but for expression, letting the music convey what words could not. It was this authenticity that made the performance unforgettable, a rare combination of skill, emotion, and character that left a lasting impression on everyone present. The millionaire, seated with a thoughtful expression, realized that he had misjudged her entirely. He had assumed that wealth and status could intimidate, belittle, or overshadow talent, but she had shown him that true skill and courage transcended superficial power. The contrast between his arrogance and her quiet confidence was stark, and the lesson was undeniable. He felt a mixture of respect and regret, understanding that he had been given a glimpse of something extraordinary that could not be bought or faked. Meanwhile, the young waitress continued to play, seamlessly transitioning between gentle, reflective passages and more powerful, sweeping movements. Each section of the melody revealed a different facet of her talent and emotion, drawing the listeners deeper into her world. Guests were no longer passive observers. They were participants, experiencing the highs and lows of her performance as if they were part of the story she was telling. The room was alive with energy, yet there was a sense of calm focus, a shared reverence for the skill and emotion on display. She allowed brief pauses between sections, creating spaces where the silence itself became part of the performance. These moments of quiet tension amplified the impact of each note that followed, giving the audience time to reflect and absorb the emotion of the music. It was a subtle technique, one that demonstrated not only her technical skill but also her deep understanding of the power of pacing and expression. Guests felt themselves drawn in, their hearts responding to the ebb and flow of the melody, while the millionaire sat in quiet contemplation, realizing the depth of what he had underestimated. As the performance reached its peak, the young waitress played with a renewed intensity. Her fingers moved swiftly, yet gracefully, across the keys, producing a cascade of sound that was both powerful and delicate. Every note was deliberate, every chord carefully crafted, and the result was a breathtaking culmination of skill and emotion. Guests were captivated, their admiration growing with every passing moment. Some were moved to tears, others to quiet awe, all fully immersed in the experience she created. The millionaire's initial smirk had disappeared entirely. He watched, humbled, as the young waitress transformed a moment that had begun with mockery into an unforgettable display of artistry and courage. He felt a sense of respect that he had rarely experienced, recognizing the true value of talent, humility, and determination. It was a revelation that challenged his assumptions, a lesson in the power of authenticity and dedication. Finally, the young waitress allowed the music to soften, gradually fading into gentle, lingering notes. The room remained silent for a moment, as if holding its breath to savor the conclusion. Then, slowly, the applause began, rising in volume and intensity. Guests cheered and clapped, their admiration genuine and heartfelt. The young waitress bowed slightly, acknowledging their praise with a calm, humble smile. She had not sought recognition, yet it was freely given, a testament to the impact of her talent and character. The millionaire rose from his seat, joining the applause, his expression one of sincere respect. He approached the young waitress, offering a nod and a brief, genuine compliment. It was a moment of acknowledgement, a recognition of skill and courage that transcended social status or wealth. Guests watched this interaction, impressed by the humility displayed and inspired by the powerful demonstration of character and talent. As the evening drew to a close, the atmosphere remained charged with admiration and reflection. The young waitress continued her duties with grace, her calm composure and quiet confidence leaving a lasting impression on everyone she encountered. The piano, now silent, stood as a reminder of the extraordinary performance, a symbol of the unexpected beauty that could emerge when talent, courage, and humility came together. The millionaire, once ready to mock and dominate, left with a newfound respect and understanding, forever changed by the quiet power of a young woman who dared to share her gift with the world. The night had grown quieter, yet the energy from the performance still lingered in the room like a gentle echo. Guests continued to speak softly among themselves, reliving the moments of the performance, sharing their amazement and appreciation for what they had witnessed. Even though dinner had resumed, the atmosphere had changed. The elegance of the hotel and the wealth of the guests no longer defined the room. Instead, a sense of genuine admiration for talent, courage, and humility had taken its place. The young waitress moved through the tables with the same calm grace, attending to guests and carrying plates with precision. Her demeanor was composed, her movements effortless, but there was a quiet satisfaction in the subtle pride she carried. She knew that what she had shared at the piano was more than just a performance. It was a statement of her dedication and her belief in herself. She had turned a moment meant to belittle her into an opportunity to reveal her strength, and that was something no one could take away. The millionaire sat at his table, observing her quietly. He had come to the evening expecting entertainment at someone else's expense, but instead, he had been given a lesson in humility and respect. He found himself reflecting on his behavior, on the arrogance he had carried, and on the value of recognizing talent and effort regardless of status. There was a subtle shift within him, a realization that true power and admiration could not be demanded but had to be earned, often in ways far removed from wealth or influence. As the night progressed, the piano remained in the corner, silent but full of potential. Guests glanced at it occasionally, imagining the beauty it could produce again, but there was no pressure. The young waitress approached it once more, this time with a sense of intention that was calm yet commanding. She adjusted her posture, placed her fingers lightly on the keys, and allowed the first notes to drift into the room. Unlike before, there was no sense of challenge or expectation. This was simply her expressing herself, letting the music flow naturally and freely. The melody she created this time was softer, more reflective, yet it carried the same depth of emotion. Guests listened intently, captivated by the way each note conveyed a story, a feeling that transcended words. There was a gentle power to the music, a quiet assertion of skill and heart that spoke directly to everyone in the room. Even the millionaire leaned forward slightly, unable to resist the pull of the sound, feeling emotions he had rarely allowed himself to experience in such a setting. Her hands moved over the keys with confidence and fluidity. She was not performing to impress, nor was she seeking validation. Every note came from a place of honesty, a reflection of her passion and dedication. Guests could sense this authenticity, and it resonated deeply. Some closed their eyes to better feel the music, while others leaned in, caught up in the beauty and complexity of what they were hearing. The room had become a shared space of emotion and connection, a place where music spoke louder than words. The millionaire could not help but notice how the atmosphere had shifted again. Where he had once been the center of attention, now she commanded the room with nothing more than her talent and presence. He felt a mixture of respect, humility, and curiosity. He had underestimated her, and the lesson was clear. Skill, courage, and authenticity held a power that his wealth and status could not match. He silently acknowledged this realization, understanding that admiration earned in this way was far more meaningful than any that could be bought. The young waitress continued, seamlessly blending gentle, tender passages with more intricate and expressive sequences. Her fingers danced across the keys, creating a rich tapestry of sound that captured both the mind and heart. Guests were transported, experiencing joy, tension, and serenity through her music. It was a testament to the hours she had spent honing her craft, the dedication she had invested, and the courage she had shown in stepping forward despite the millionaire's initial mockery. The room was completely absorbed in the performance. Conversations had ceased, and even the staff paused in their duties to witness the unfolding artistry. The young waitress's music had created a temporary world where all that mattered was the beauty and emotion of the moment. The millionaire, usually so confident in his influence, sat silently, watching and listening, realizing that he had encountered something far greater than he could have anticipated. As the melody grew stronger, she allowed it to swell into an emotional peak. The notes cascaded through the room with a power that demanded attention yet retained a sense of delicacy. Every chord, every subtle pause, conveyed a story, a journey of resilience and self-belief. Guests were moved, some visibly touched, others simply enthralled by the technical skill and emotional depth of the performance. The young waitress was not just playing music. She was communicating a part of herself, a truth that resonated with everyone who listened. The millionaire's expression softened. He had entered the evening expecting amusement and entertainment, but now he was faced with a display of talent and character that humbled him. He realized that true admiration could not be commanded through wealth or status. It was something that had to be earned through skill, integrity, and courage. The young waitress had earned it effortlessly, simply by being herself and sharing her gift with the world. As the performance approached its conclusion, she gradually brought the music to a gentle resolution. The notes lingered, fading softly into the room, leaving a sense of calm and reflection. Guests remained silent for a moment, absorbing the impact of what they had just experienced. Then, slowly, applause began, building in volume and intensity. It was a genuine, heartfelt response, a recognition of both her skill and her courage. The young waitress accepted it with quiet grace, bowing slightly but not seeking further attention. She had given the room an unforgettable experience, and that alone was her reward. The millionaire stood as well, joining in the applause. His respect for her was evident, and he approached her with a sincere nod and a brief compliment. It was a small gesture, but it carried immense weight, representing an acknowledgement of her talent and character. Guests watched this interaction, inspired by the lesson in humility and the power of skill and integrity. The young waitress, composed and humble, returned to her duties, allowing the applause to fade naturally, her presence remaining calm and confident. Throughout the rest of the evening, the atmosphere had transformed. Conversations carried a sense of admiration and inspiration, the story of the performance circulating among guests and staff alike. The young waitress moved through the room with quiet authority, her calm demeanor and understated confidence leaving a lasting impression on everyone. She had proven that true talent could shine without arrogance, that courage and authenticity could transform expectations, and that humility was a strength that demanded respect. The millionaire, reflecting on the evening, understood that he had been given a rare lesson. He had entered seeking amusement at someone else's expense, but had witnessed the power of genuine skill and character. He realized that wealth and influence could not replace talent, dedication, and humility. The experience had changed him, instilling a deeper appreciation for those who excelled quietly and authentically. It was a moment he would not soon forget. The young waitress, meanwhile, continued her work with the same focus and grace she had shown all evening. She had faced a challenge, transformed it into an opportunity, and shared a part of herself that had left a profound impact on everyone present. The piano now stood silent, yet its presence reminded all who had witnessed the performance of the beauty and power that could emerge from unexpected places. Guests left with a renewed sense of admiration and inspiration, and the millionaire departed with a newfound respect and understanding, forever changed by the quiet strength and extraordinary talent of a young woman who had dared to share her gift. The evening had reached its final hours, yet the energy from the young waitress's performance still lingered like a gentle hum throughout the restaurant. Guests who had been present earlier found themselves speaking in hushed tones, sharing their admiration and discussing the impact of what they had witnessed. The piano, now silent, stood as a quiet witness to the extraordinary display of talent and courage that had transformed the night. It was no longer just a piece of furniture in the corner. It had become a symbol of inspiration, humility, and the power of authenticity. The young waitress moved through the room with the same calm, graceful demeanor she had displayed all evening. Her steps were measured, her presence unassuming, yet there was a quiet strength about her that drew attention without demanding it. She continued her duties, attending to guests with precision and courtesy, but there was a subtle aura around her now, a sense of respect that had grown naturally from the performance she had shared. Guests who had initially overlooked her now regarded her with admiration, their perception transformed by the talent and courage she had displayed. The millionaire sat quietly at his table, reflecting on the events of the evening. His usual confidence, his expectation to dominate and entertain at the expense of others, had been completely upended. He had entered the room with a sense of superiority, but the young waitress had challenged every assumption he had made. He had expected to mock and belittle, but instead, he had been confronted with something far more powerful: skill, humility, and authenticity. The realization was humbling, forcing him to reconsider not only his behavior but also the way he evaluated the worth of others. As he watched her move gracefully among the tables, interacting with guests and staff alike, he noticed how naturally she commanded attention without trying. Her quiet confidence, her patience, and her composure had created an impact that money and status could not achieve. He found himself thinking deeply about the lessons she had unknowingly taught him. True influence came not from wealth or arrogance but from the ability to inspire, to touch hearts, and to remain genuine in every action. It was a revelation that challenged him, quietly reshaping his perspective. The young waitress approached the piano one final time. There was no sense of challenge, no expectation beyond sharing her gift for the sheer love of music. She sat gracefully at the bench, placing her fingers lightly on the keys, and allowed the first soft notes to drift into the room. The sound was gentle, reflective, and deeply emotive, carrying a sense of closure and tranquility. Guests, sensing that this was the final expression of the evening, turned their attention fully toward her, captivated by the beauty and authenticity of the moment. Her music flowed with effortless grace, a seamless blend of technical skill and emotional depth. Each note was deliberate, yet full of feeling, creating a melody that resonated with everyone present. The room seemed to hold its breath, absorbing the nuances of the performance, responding intuitively to the emotion conveyed through the piano. It was a shared experience, a connection between performer and audience that transcended words. The young waitress was not performing for recognition or approval. She was sharing a piece of herself, and that sincerity was what made the moment unforgettable. Guests were visibly moved, some leaning in, eyes closed, letting the music wash over them, while others watched intently, captivated by the combination of skill, grace, and emotion. The young waitress's performance had created a sense of unity, a quiet harmony among all those present. It was more than a display of talent. It was a demonstration of courage, integrity, and authenticity, qualities that had left an indelible mark on everyone in the room. The millionaire, observing this final performance, felt a profound sense of admiration and humility. He realized that he had been given a rare opportunity to witness the impact of genuine talent and character. The young waitress had not only transformed the atmosphere of the room but had also challenged his assumptions about power, influence, and respect. Her performance was a quiet assertion of strength, one that required no arrogance or pretense. He recognized that he had underestimated her, and the acknowledgement of that fact was humbling. As the music built to a gentle yet powerful crescendo, the young waitress allowed herself to be fully immersed in the melody. Each note carried meaning, each chord spoke of resilience and passion, and each pause created space for reflection. Guests were captivated, experiencing a spectrum of emotions, from awe to inspiration to quiet joy. The performance had become more than entertainment. It had become a shared emotional journey, one that connected everyone in the room in a way that was deeply personal and profoundly moving. The finale of the performance arrived with a delicate and lingering chord, resonating through the room like a soft echo. The silence that followed was heavy with appreciation and contemplation, as guests processed the beauty and emotional depth of what they had just experienced. Slowly, the applause began, tentative at first, then growing in intensity as everyone expressed their admiration. It was heartfelt and genuine, a collective recognition of the extraordinary talent and courage that had transformed the evening. The young waitress acknowledged the applause with a quiet nod and a gentle smile, her composure unwavering. She did not seek the attention. It came naturally as a result of her skill, authenticity, and the courage she had shown. Her performance had not only captivated the audience but had also shifted the dynamic of the room. The millionaire, rising from his seat, joined in the applause with a sincere expression of respect. He approached her, offering a nod and a simple, genuine compliment. It was an acknowledgement that spoke volumes, a recognition of talent and integrity that could not be measured by wealth or status. Guests continued to speak in hushed tones, inspired by what they had witnessed. They discussed the talent, the composure, and the humility of the young waitress, and the story of her performance began to spread quietly throughout the room. She moved among them with the same grace and efficiency as before, leaving a lasting impression on each person she encountered. Her presence, once overlooked, now commanded respect and admiration, not through force or ambition, but through the natural impact of her actions and her music. The millionaire reflected on the evening as he prepared to leave. He had come seeking entertainment at someone else's expense, expecting amusement and control, but he had encountered something far more profound. The young waitress had demonstrated the power of talent, humility, and authenticity in a way that could not be challenged or diminished. He understood that true respect and influence were earned, not demanded, and that moments of genuine inspiration could come from the most unexpected places. As the night drew to a close, the atmosphere remained charged with a sense of awe and reflection. Guests left with renewed appreciation for talent and character, inspired by the courage and skill they had witnessed. The young waitress, calm and composed, continued her duties, her presence leaving a lasting impression on everyone she encountered. The piano, now silent, stood as a symbol of the extraordinary impact of authenticity, perseverance, and quiet strength. In the end, the evening had become more than just a night at a luxurious hotel. It had become a story of talent, courage, and the unexpected power of humility. The young waitress had transformed a situation meant for mockery into an unforgettable display of artistry and integrity. The millionaire had been humbled, the guests inspired, and the young woman herself had quietly proven that true strength comes from dedication, authenticity, and the courage to share one's gift with the world. The memory of her performance would linger, a testament to the enduring power of skill, humility, and the quiet confidence that leaves a lasting mark on all who witness it.